Good afternoon and welcome to today's presentation, From Smartphones to Smart Homes. The information presented by the expert is not to be used as legal advice and does not indicate a working relationship with the expert. All materials obtained from this presentation are merely for educational purposes and should not be used in a court of law since the expert's consent, i.e. a business relationship where she or he is hired for your particular case. In today's webinar, Simon will discuss Introduction to Mobile Forensics, Location Analysis, Communications, Timeline Analysis, and Internet of Things. To give you a little background about our presenter, Simon Varley has nearly 20 years of experience in providing digital forensics and security services to governments, corporations, and law firms. He received a Bachelor's of Science degree with honors in electronics from the University of Central Lancashire in England before moving into safety and security analysis for the UK Ministry of Defence. His expertise in cell phone forensics is at the highest level, having received multiple certifications and advanced training in that area. Simon has been approved as an expert by several courts and is a regular presenter to industry and legal professionals on digital forensics and e-discovery. Attendees who require passwords, the code for today is phones. During the Q&A session, we ask that you enter this passcode into the Q&A widget for CLE reporting purposes. The Q&A is located to the left of your screen. Please note that Simon will be answering all questions at the end of this program. Please remember that if you are applying for CLE credit, you must log onto your computer as yourself and stay for the full 60 minutes. You are also required to complete the survey at the end of the program. Please note that CLE credit cannot be given to those watching together on a single computer. Tomorrow morning, we will send out an email with a link to the archive recording of the webinar. The slides can be downloaded from the resource list at the widget located at the bottom of your screen. Thank you all for attending today, and Simon, the presentation is now turned over to you.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I have to apologize a little bit. I'm losing my voice with perfect timing, of course. But I will crack on and persevere. The presentation is From Smartphones to Smart Homes, covering basically what a mobile forensic examiner might look at in different legal cases. A little bit about me. Obviously, it's been stated before, but I have an electronics background. I went to work for the Ministry of Defence in England. Some people think that the UK Ministry of Defence is like the Ministry of Magic in Harry Potter, but it does exist, I promise. I got into forensics initially in Prague, working for a forensic search software company, working with different intelligence agencies. And I work as an expert witness on all types of criminal family law cases. So let's crack on to an introduction to mobile forensics. So what is it? What does it cover? What kind of devices are we dealing with here? What can a mobile forensic examiner help you with? Well, the main one, obviously, and I apologize, the fonts are a little funky on these next few slides, but we will continue. Smartphones. Most people have your iPhones, your Galaxies. These are the most common devices that we get through the doors that people carry around every day. However, we do get some not-so-smartphones called feature phones. It's good that they pictured my personal phone in that. We do have a term that's used for people that use feature phones, and the term is criminals, because they tend to buy burner phones. So we do see a lot of these older flip phones, these limited data phones. They're very hard to get into, and we don't get a lot of data out of them. So they can be a little bit frustrating, but they're still out there in use and a key part of a lot of cases. Next, wearables. We see a lot of those. They can be helpful sometimes. Obviously, things like your Fitbit trackers and things like that will monitor health data, which can be useful in sort of confirming time of events such as attacks or in death and murder cases. Can be used to sort of establish a time of death, which has been used to contradict witness testimony, which then makes that person, that witness, a person of interest. So it can be useful in specific cases. And finally, the Internet of Things you might have heard about as houses and more devices get interconnected, there is digital data on these that can be used in certain cases. Can be used to establish things like alibis, and we'll go through that in a little bit more detail. So if you have a case that contains digital devices like this, you know, how can we help? When do we come in? When does a mobile forensic examiner come in? Well, normally we like to come in and do a discovery review, first of all, to let you know, try and identify what devices may be important, what path to take, what can be helpful. And in cases where there's communications involved, we can look in to see about premeditation. Communication is going to be important there. People talk about what they're about to do. We have had Google searches for, I think one of them was roid rage murder defense was Googled prior to an incident, which showed premeditation. Text and chat and all social media are included in there. These can all be useful sources of information in a case. Media, if the other side provides information saying this photo is on the device, we can look at, is it there, how did it get there, and try and build a timeline, work out what action brought that video or image onto the cell phone. We've had cases where it's been on a device, however, with things like WhatsApp, somebody inside a chat with you on WhatsApp can send a photo that can be automatically saved to your phone without intent there. So we were able to show that you didn't download this image. It was actually sent from another person. Location data, there's a lot of location data that can be on a phone and other digital devices, can go to show that somebody was somewhere, or more often the case that show that somebody was not somewhere. The device itself can be a router, can be a cell tower data, which we'll go into a little bit. But location is a big part of what we can show. Also, behavior. We can create a timeline of activity on a cell phone, and it can kind of show frame of mind to some extent. If someone's downloading, Candy Crush on their phone, it can move to sort of contradict that they were in fear of their life. So there's certain things we can do and help with that kind of side of the case as well. One thing we try and do, especially on criminal cases, is try and help the defense attorney work out why law enforcement knocked on his client's door. We do this kind of by, it's quite hard to see, I apologize, but by creating something called a chain of suspicion. We analyze the discovery materials and then try and explain to the attorney why they think it's his client and what gaps there may be in their chain here. So we start off, this is an example, say, of somebody having inappropriate chat on a chat application such as Kik. And so we get the documents from discovery, and we see that the law enforcement subpoenaed the website and asking for information on a username. The website, or Kik, the company, will provide maybe an email address of the person who registered with that username. And so they start off with that email address. They then, maybe if it's a Yahoo email address, they will subpoena Yahoo and say, okay, we have this email account. Could you provide me the IP addresses that logged in and created that email address and people who visited that? And they'll get that as their response to subpoena. They'll get a list of IP addresses. They can then translate these online addresses essentially to normally a company. It's normally an ISP company, internet service provider, such as Comcast, will have those IP addresses. And so law enforcement will subpoena Comcast and say, who was using this IP address, this internet address at this time? And if it's come to a criminal case, then it's probably come back with the subscriber, the Comcast subscriber being the attorney's client. And that's probably why they think it was him that was performing the activity on Kik, say. But there are two other steps there to think about. What device was connected and who was the person using the device at the time, because the subscriber, the IP address, is just being used by a Wi-Fi router. to connect to the internet. So any device connected to that Wi-Fi router would have left the same evidence in this first part of the chain. So normally what happens is law enforcement will use the first part of this chain to get a search warrant. They'll go in, collect all the devices, and then by looking at the data on the devices, try and make that last connection. However, it has been seen many times that they don't have these last two chains, or it's very weak. There's photos of the search warrant execution that had other people in the house with other devices that were photographed but not collected, things like that. And we can kind of say, well, we should focus our attention on, showing that there could have been other devices. Was the Wi-Fi router password protected? Things like that. And so we do this at the start, at discovery, to help focus the direction of the analysis and work towards a narrative that the attorney can use to fight the case. So that's part of where a mobile forensics examiner's starting point. That's kind of where we start to help. Is it worth collecting? Well, nowadays phones storing more and more data on it. There's phones now with 1 terabyte of data on there, and just to sort of equate that to other things, we can see that it's about 2 million selfies. That's actually what I look like when I do take a selfie, unfortunately. But it's also equivalent to 83,000 copies of Harry Potter, the complete collection, which is the official unit of measurement of memory for the UK. But more seriously and more importantly, it's actually equivalent to 2 older iMacs that you're now storing in a device that's carried around with a person. So there's going to be a lot of information in there, a lot of data to look at. We just need to know how to look at it and whether it's going to be useful. What will it contain? Well, we're all kind of aware. There's lots of apps out there, Google Play. But this is even slightly dated, so there's well over 2 million apps out there for Android, and about a little less for Apple. And they cover, as we're all probably aware, cover navigation, a lot of photo filtering apps that can be useful because it saves copies of images to separate locations. So you might delete the original photo, but the filtered one may be somewhere on the device. Dating, social media. So there's lots of use of the phone, a lot more business use of cell phones. So it's a lot more interesting data that's being stored on a device now. Well, when we come to talk about data, obviously a lot of people want a mobile forensic examiner to recover deleted data. It's important. People are obviously going to hide the things that they do. So we want to look at that. Now, on the screen now, you'll see basically what a mobile examiner will look at when he's processing the data. It will sort of organize it in categories for him to examine. The numbers in parentheses are the total number of records, and in the red parentheses is how many of those are deleted that were recovered. So this is kind of a general spread. It's different for every device, depending on use, but you can see here in the 2 main highest proportion of deleted recovered is searched items and web history. And that is quite typical. It's very easy to clear those. And very common that people want to clear those, but very easily recovered. So that's good for us. So what do we see normally when we come to recover these things? Well, the most common thing we see, especially the searched items, is this. We see a lot of that. People are very worried. They're aware of what we might be able to do. So we see a lot of that. But a lot of times we get just different search terms, whatever they've typed in, we'll be able to pull out. Just a few key points here. Most deleted data we'll be able to recover from iPhones. The way Apple stores the information in databases, the deleted data stays on there a little bit longer, and we get a lot of better access to it. And the older Androids, where the security has been bypassed by our forensic tools, we're able to pull raw data off the microchips. Newer Android phones, the security is working to stop nasty people like me accessing the data to protect the user. So it's more difficult to get deleted data from these newer phones. Stays on the phone, we see anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. I mean, it could be longer. Really depends on the activity of the phone, how often the updates are performed, things like that. It's really case by case. It does not show the data deletion. We get asked that a lot. Can you tell when they deleted that? And no, the only way we can really do that is by looking at the phone at an earlier time and seeing whether it was there and then comparing it later. And then the one way we can do that is by looking at other sources of that cell phone data, like an iCloud backup. So if there's a backup maybe just after the legal document comes in saying don't delete anything, there's a backup dated then that has it, and then you have the phone and it's no longer there. That can be useful. What we can do, looking on the phone, there is data on the phone itself that will say whether there's an iCloud backup, so we can then go have a look and see, and it says, okay, yeah, this is it is cloud backup is enabled. We got a date that we can convert to an actual date and time. We know when the last time you did it. We can then use credentials if we have them, or compel them, or have a third party do it to download, go in and access the iCloud, download those backups, and then it parses out as if we had the phone at that time. And then we can compare the data. And obviously, because deleted data does disappear over time, the nearer to an incident that you get the backup, the more likely the deleted material will be recoverable. So it can be useful, sometimes overlooked. So we do recommend that to attorneys. In terms of data loss, cell phone data is very, very volatile, unfortunately. And so we do see a lot of this. People do get rid of it quite quickly. They're especially if there's things to hide, they think it's probably better to damage the phone rather than explain what's on it. So we do try. I mean, just because it's slightly damaged like this doesn't mean necessarily that we can't get information from it. But it's something that we have to think about, and we have to try as soon as the case happens, or expectation of a case happening, we have to start thinking about protecting this evidence. One great threat to that is the remote wipe capabilities of certain smartphones. So Apple, unfortunately, has changed the way digital forensics works on cell phones, because they have the Find My iPhone, and you can remote erase the data. So what happens is, this is quite a problem for law enforcement, because what happens is they hand over a powered down phone, they go to a different device, or their friend goes to a different connected device, logs into Find My iPhone, and sends the erase command to the phone. So when the officer takes out the phone, charges it, or powers it up, as soon as it hits like a cell tower signal or a Wi-Fi signal, it will erase. And you won't be able to get it into airplane mode quick enough. So it's something we have to think about and consider. I know Android's got a similar thing as well, but it's more common with Apple and iPhones. So how do we protect the data? Well, we use technology created by Michael Faraday, the British inventor. He basically determined that a copper cage could block electromagnetic signals. And anybody who's watched a Gene Hackman movie, well, just any Gene Hackman movie, basically, will have seen him sat in a copper cage at some point in his movies. And that's to protect signals from blocking signals going out or coming in to where he's working. And so that works in this case. So we have to keep a cell phone in essentially a copper cage. Now, it's a little bit more sophisticated now. We actually have bags, Faraday bags, that we can keep the cell phone in and power it up inside the bag. Now, this means that it will power up without being able to connect to a Wi-Fi network or a cell tower. And so that signal will never reach the phone to wipe. It normally has a see-through screen on the front, so we can still touch through the bag itself to put in the passcode and get the phone into airplane mode. Once it's in airplane mode, we can take the phone out and analyze it and work on the data. So just an extra process that we have to do, but it does sort of show the importance of having an expert look at this with some knowledge, because just having somebody, paralegal or somebody looking at a phone, especially if it's come from the other side, you know, there is a risk to data there that needs to be understood. And this, you know, the importance of protecting the evidence, this was shown in a case recently, Gerald F. Donovan versus Kevin S. Fowler, who is better known as Kevin Spacey. In this case, it appeared that the accuser deleted certain messages between him and his then girlfriend. So, from his phone before sending screenshots to an officer. So there's two issues here. One, first of all, screenshots are not really good enough in terms of for evidence, in the sense that they are just images that can be altered, and we see that quite often. But also, deleting messages between him and his then girlfriend. I mean, it could have been irrelevant messages that he was slightly embarrassed about, but once you sort of question the integrity of the data, once you start to say, well, you know, this isn't it, it's been changed, then that damages the case, and it gave attorneys something to fight, and definitely damaged the case there. And then, of course, the way to sort this would be to then get the phone and then try and recover what was deleted, and then just sort of prove what was on the phone was actually valid. But of course, it came out that he couldn't find the cell phone, and so, you know, that's why the case collapsed. And it's important to protect the evidence from, you know, protect it from your own clients, and say, you know, the court does not care about embarrassing photos or anything like that. We just can't change the evidence. Otherwise, it damages the case. Moving on to location analysis. Where were they? Where weren't they? This is a huge part. This is a huge part of what we do. And we get asked to do this a lot. Can you show where a person was? And it's quite useful being a cell phone as opposed to other forms of forensics, because people do carry it around with them. Whatever kind of case, there's a cell phone in there somewhere being carried around. So let's have a little look about location data on the phone. Map applications, huge part of modern day life. I would get lost in my city without it even. But we have things like Waze. These are all the sort of types of data that could have locations in them, like media locations, which will come to wireless networks, social media messages. They could all have location information on there. But let's have a look at Waze and these navigation apps. We can basically pull out coordinates. Each journey you go on will have saved the point you were heading to, and we can pull out these coordinates and map them quite readily. And it's quite common that we find interesting information there, because people, they overlook things. They quite often want to find the quickest route to the crime scene, you know, by bypassing tolls, and inadvertently, you know, type it in there. So we do find some interesting information that is just overlooked in the heat of the moment by certain people. But we can pull that out quite readily, as you can imagine. Other places for location data, well, there's a certain thing called metadata. Now, meta is Greek for beyond, so things like when you say metaphysical, it's things beyond the physical. So metadata is things beyond the actual data of the file. So an example here, like an image, well, I always use the example of a Word document. The data of the file is what's written in the document, in the Word document, and the fonts and everything that goes into making that file. However, there's additional information about the author, say, or when it was created, when it was last modified. That kind of information isn't about the content of the file, but it's stored with the file, and that's the metadata. And images have a lot of metadata normally. So you take a photo, it will, as we can see here, have created, accessed, and modified dates and times on there. It'll have the phone camera model. this, we've used before to disprove screenshots to say by pulling out metadata from the original images. We've asked them to hand over phones. They've handed over the wrong phone. We've actually used metadata to show, oh, well, this photo you took was actually from a different phone. Capture time, and of course the coordinates, which is how Apple likes to use this to group your photographs by geographic locations. Like, oh, when you're in London, these are the photos you took in London. It's using this metadata to group them together. And we can pull out that information and map it out there, build in sort of a chain of events and things like that. Sometimes, it really depends on settings whether this location information is saved as part of the metadata or not. One of the reasons is that most people take photos on their cell phones now for upload to social media, and social media strips metadata from the images before posting it, and it's all because of this Twitter post that started that. It was by one of the guys from Mythbusters, the San Francisco-based TV show. He tweeted this photo of his car, and then people downloaded it, pulled out the coordinates and location information from the image itself, and then, an hour later, he had a crowd of people outside his house. So ever since he complained about that, all the social media platforms strip out the metadata before uploading. And so it's less prominent as an automatic thing on a cell phone now. It really depends on settings. But we can pull out location information from things like Facebook Messenger chats. You see this little icon there that looks like the Google Maps icon on that message. That's actually a message that's been deleted, that's been recovered, but there is location information there, so we know where that person was when they responded in Facebook Messenger. And of course, it shouldn't be overlooked that sometimes there actually in the actual image there can be location information as well. We sometimes get too focused on these digital things that we forget that people do take photos and selfies in places and then later claim they weren't there. So these are all things that we can look at and if we're trying to map out something for a case. Another part of this is Wi-Fi networks. They provide us with some location data. As you can see here, Pete's Pizza and Westgate Las Vegas, they have a last connected date and time and a last order connected date and time. But they can show that someone was there, possibly might have some connection information there. And we can build that into it. There is also an interesting thing that most people aren't aware of. And if you see here, Colin's Wi-Fi, there's no last connected or last order connected date and time. So this person didn't actually connect to the Wi-Fi network, but it still saved information on the phone. Now, it does this because, I don't know whether people are like me, but I get frustrated when I try and connect to Wi-Fi and it takes more than, a fraction of a second to connect. I get very frustrated. And so in order to help that, there's a little bit of handshake that goes on between your phone and the Wi-Fi network, just in case you want to connect to it. And so we can pull that information out, and we might be able to see some Wi-Fi networks that weren't connected to, but still get the information. Now, when might this be useful without a date and time? Well, there was a case where two people were accused of stealing a car. And we were representing one of the suspects, but our client, the attorney, didn't think that he was the mastermind behind it all because he actually dumped the car in front of a policeman and left his phone number and name on a bit of paper in the car. But he wanted to see if it was possible to see who stole the car itself from here. So we got the name of the Wi-Fi network of the person's house that the car was stolen from outside. And this name appeared like this, not connected, but appeared on one of the other suspect's cell phone. So we were able to show that the other person had been in the vicinity of that house, and it was more likely that he'd stolen the car than our suspect. So it can be useful in certain cases, and it's another thing that we look at there. And I created this image because we do work with employment law and these wage and hour cases where swear that they work 10 hours without a break. So we do try and go in, and in this case, kind of show that they were actually the bar across the street. So yeah, it's something we look at and that most people aren't aware of, which means it stays on the phone and we're able to use it because people aren't aware that they've left this evidence. Other location data in the cloud. Now, the Find My iPhone information, it can be useful in family law. We do a lot of cyber stalking issues with a disgruntled spouse cases, and it's something to look at in terms of if there's a compromise in location security for your client, like how did he know he keeps turning up, where I'm going. I think there's a tracker on my car. More likely, it could be the son's iPad uses the same Apple ID as mom's iPhone, and so dad has a look at the iPad and can look at Find My iPhone and get that location data. So something we can talk about, we can help with too. Another source of information is Google Maps. If you're not aware of this, there's a thing called Timeline that you should go on and check. It tracks your movements, where you go. And in this example, this was me. I was presenting in San Jose, I think, at the Trial Lawyers Association. And it shows quite embarrassingly how lost I got trying to leave the hotel and get back over here. It also shows that I did terribly on my diet because I stopped at McDonald's and Togo's as well. But yeah, it stores this information, good source of information. We can go on there. We can show that your client was somewhere else, or we can analyze that information. But it's stored there for use in cases. And in terms of cell tower data, each company keeps these cell tower data for different periods of time. And if you're not familiar with this, what happens is whenever an activity happens on a cell phone, so say if I'm on my phone, if I receive a text message, the cell tower and what part of the cell tower was used to send that message to me is recorded, is logged. Not the content of the message, but just the to and the from information is logged there. And that's when I send it out to, when I receive a call. This sort of information is all kept and stored for different periods of time. Verizon keeps it for 1 year. T-Mobile keeps it for 23 months, which I have no idea why it's not 2 years, but there we go, that's T-Mobile. Sprint keeps it for 18 months. And we like AT&T. They keep it for 7 years. So especially public defenders, they get a case, could be 2 years down the line. Unless they had AT&T, there's no point trying to get the cell network data from other providers because it's already gone if law enforcement hasn't requested it. So that's a problem. We used to just be able to subpoena and just ask for different phone numbers, cell tower data, because there's no content, so it wasn't protected private data. That all changed 2 years ago with Carpenter versus United States in 2018, meant that because it was, even though it's not private data, but because it was being used by law enforcement to track or locate people, it came under restrictions. So now we can't just subpoena. However, so a court order or search warrant is needed to get that information now. Or you can request your client, if it's needed to prove an alibi, your client can request their own. People can request their own cell tower data, which majority of our cases, that helps us. And we help our clients request that information, and then we can analyze it and try and show some information there. What will we see? Well, here's an example of AT&T, what they track in there. It has the connection date and time, the originating number, the terminating number, so who's it from to, who's calling, and who's receiving. Then the IMEI number, which is the equipment ID number. So that's the actual handset, confirming the actual handset reference code. And the IMSI, which is the subscriber ID, which is actually the SIM card in there. So you can confirm that and a description, make a model of the description of the activity, make a model of the phone, and then the location of the tower. So as a little example here, the description would be SMST, which is SMS terminating, so it'll be a text message coming in to an Apple iPhone 6. And here's the location information that we get normally on these subpoenas. You'll get LAIC and CID. This is basically tower identifier numbers, which the network's own reference numbers for the cell towers. We have coordinates, longitude and latitude coordinates for the tower itself, and something called the azimuth and the beam width. And we get all this information, and we can translate it and show it like this. So we can find the coordinate, put the tower there. The azimuth is the angle from north round to the center of the beam. And then you get the beam width. In this case, it's 88. And you can map out this kind of sector, which sector of the tower sent or received that activity. And then we can map that out based on a series of these entries. We do get asked quite often, isn't it unreliable? We always get challenged on this. It's not to be used for location data. And the cell networks will actually say not to be used for location data, because sometimes if there's an overload, there's a lot of activity in the area, different sectors can be used to carry the load. So what we do, we've successfully argued the use of cell tower data many times, because we never use just one instance. So it wouldn't be necessarily, say, if we just got the one record and we said, oh, the person must be here in this blue sector in our image there. What we tend to have is a series, multiple hits from the towers, sometimes describing out a path, and the likelihood of a coordinated series of redirected cell tower sectors based on an overload that would end in a coordinated path that we see, or is highly unlikely. So we successfully argued that quite a bit. So it shouldn't be discounted just because of that. Moving on to one of the most important things that we see and get asked to analyze: text messages and chat. Communications, people talk about things all the time. There's the traditional sense. We started off having SMS and MMS messages that go from the phone through the cell network to the other phone. But then Apple came along and produced the iMessage. So what that does is it sends a message not through the cell network, but it goes to the Apple servers, the Apple website, essentially, that then sends it down to the other Apple user. This has a couple of key points, one being that it's end-to-end encryption, and you'll hear that quite a bit, which means that there's no point asking Apple to tell you what the content is. It gets encrypted on the left-hand phone, gets sent encrypted through the air, essentially, and then to the other phone that decrypts it. It doesn't prevent us doing anything because we have an end, so therefore we can see the data is decrypted for us. But subpoenas or court orders to Apple are useless. Also, cases, it's in, people bring up, I've been challenged so many times about validity of these messages because they say, oh, it's not on the phone bill. Well, iMessage won't be on the phone bill because it doesn't go through the cell network. It will just show up as connecting to the internet. So that's a new sort of way of communicating. And of course, we can recover these things and produce them in spreadsheets about different conversations, whether they're deleted or not, and their times, etc. Screenshots, just a quick mention on that again, very unreliable. We actually testified at a CHP hearing, and we were able to spoof a conversation. Something was submitted as evidence, somebody videotaping another phone and scrolling through the chat messages, and then the person hit the sort of the contact name at the top, and it showed the number that was on the chat. and it was just a video essentially of that phone screen. And we were able to show that we could spoof that. We sent messages here at the office between two iPhones, and a certain version of an iPhone. You could then, once you create the chat, go back in and change the contact name and number of that conversation, and then, and falsify. So that's not necessarily what happened, but that just goes to show the unreliability of that type of evidence. You need to get a forensic extraction to show that this information was on the phone and it was stored there. This is actually what an iMessage looks like. It's got a lot of information in there, a lot of flags and information that we can do. We can search and uncover deleted messages by searching for something called a handle ID. When someone new messages you, your phone assigns them an identifier that we can then search for and pull out partial messages and things like that. That's just something that we can work towards and pull out, but this is what it actually looks like. We do that a lot on cases, certain employment and sexual harassment cases that we do. This is actually what I'm going to go through now is an example. It crops up so many times, so it's a useful thing to go through. This is where two people at work have a consensual affair, normally a supervisor and a subordinate. What happens is the supervisor and the subordinate have this affair, and then it comes to an end at some point. And then the supervisor normally says to the subordinate, "Can you, we shouldn't do this. Please delete the messages." And of course, it's all on the subordinate's phone as well. And the subordinate agrees and goes, "Yeah, certainly, I'll delete it." The supervisor deletes theirs. The subordinate doesn't. And they keep it on their phone. Maybe 6 months later, a year, the subordinate gets fired or reprimanded and then claims sexual harassment. And then to provide us evidence, provides a selection of messages used to incriminate the other person. So we normally get the supervisor or the company itself coming to us and going, "Can you look and see, is there anything, is it exactly as this subordinate said?" And so that's a lot of a message recovery that we tend to do. Other ways to chat nowadays, there's lots of different apps, lots of different things. The way kids are chatting changes all the time, and we have to really try and keep up. And it's very difficult because it's not as if I can Google search how to talk to a teenager online. That'll get me flagged quite quickly, but we do need to understand what's being used, what information the companies of these chat apps get during registration. Is there a way to de-anonymize a username, say, and try and get some information there? But a lot of them are based on databases. Databases are essentially a series of tables, just like an Excel spreadsheet. And we can just analyze those. This is about, WhatsApp. It's based on like this, and we just pull out the table of messages, and we got reference numbers to rebuild the chat messages and, possibly produce them in court. And so, yeah, most of them are like that. Some of them aren't. One of the ones that are very naughty indeed is Snapchat. Very difficult to do this if you're not aware. Messages disappear after a period of time, and they're deleted from the Snapchat servers. Snapchat have been quite almost obstructive in providing data. Even to law enforcement on ongoing missing person cases, they will not readily give out any information. But we do get some things from a phone. It used to be a lot better. You used to maybe get information of a message being sent somewhere, but we can get contacts, which can be useful. We proved there was a home invasion case where it was actually a drug deal gone wrong. We were able to show previous communication between the suspect and the victim, the alleged victim, that contradicted their chain of events. So it can be useful, but unfortunately, it's very limited, and there's not much we can do. Timeline analysis. This is, what we do. We put together activity on the cell phones over a period of time to help build a story of what happens. Just chronologically organizes all the information, and we can see here, I blocked out the numbers obviously, but there's incoming call with the 0 duration, then a call back essentially for a period of time. A video is taken, and it created a thumbnail. Calls here, somebody searched for Father's Day drawing by kids. And then right beneath it is actually saved in the web history with the correct spelling of father. So he typed it in. It suggested the correct search in a drop down, as Google does. He selected that. That kind of detail of what goes on. And that can help build up a picture, especially domestic abuse cases, other things. We can see what's really gone on and try and get frame of mind of what was happening at that time. It proves useful. Tony Scott Searcy. It was a sexual assault case where he said that at the time this woman was assaulted, he was asleep. But unfortunately, his cell phone contradicted his statement. And the more definitive the sworn statement is, the more effective forensic evidence can be. If he said, and we see this all the time with one of the sexual harassment cases, a woman stated that never sent any messages of a non-work related matter to the other person. And of course that meant we only had to find 1 or 2 to refute that, that statement. And in this case, he said he was asleep, definitely, and then that way it's a lot easier for us to contradict that with forensic evidence. If he'd said, oh, I was in and out of sleep, but I wasn't, wasn't there, then it would have been a lot harder. But in this case, Timeline identified several artifacts that would contradict the fact that he was asleep. He might have gone, he might have looked at something, he might have taken a photo, might have sent a text message. It doesn't say the actual details, but it can be very important to show what really happened over a period of time. Moving on, lastly, to the wonderful Internet of Things. What is it? Well, it kind of brought about by the increase in use of things like the Amazon, the Alexa, Google Home, these kind of smart home devices that we all have. I argue with Alexa constantly because certain things I say in a British accent that Alexa does not understand and refuses to learn. But it means that a lot of different things come on the market to try and connect to these devices. We have thermostats, smart bulbs, which can be useful, door locks. I love the door lock because as soon as a smart lock came out, they had to send a security patch to update it. Because what the criminals found out was you could go to one-story houses, go to the back to the bedroom window, and say, Alexa, open the front door, and the front door would pop open. So they had to send a little patch to just allow locking and not unlocking. We have all kinds of kitchen equipment, and they're all tripping over themselves to release smart versions so they can charge a lot more money. And then cameras, security, surveillance systems, things like that. Now, they all store a little bit of data, and they all kind of can help us in specific instances. Things like the smart bulbs, there's data we can get sometimes based on whether the lights were on, off, that sort of information. Keeps a lot of self-diagnostic information that we can use. Nest is a system that detects motion. So we can, if you have a client that says, I was home alone, I live alone and I was at home during that time frame, and no one saw him, this could be very useful because it will show, well, somebody larger than an animal, some person, was walking about during that time frame and turning on the lights and turning off the lights. It's just a little bit of evidence that can be used in specific cases, and the more smart devices we get, the more better picture we can get. Essentially, soon it will be like physical forensics, where when you walk through a house, you expect there to be traces, physical forensic detectable traces of where you went and that you were there, And soon it's going to be like that with digital data. Just walking through, you're going to leave little markers so that what the truth will actually come out. One example that I use of where it may end up, I'm a big fan of DATELINE. You know, most cases, it turns out this starts with a 911 call, a husband in tears saying, I just came home from work and my wife's been, there's been a break-in, my wife's been murdered. And by the end of the DATELINE episode, you find out he did it. So things might be a little bit different with the advent of the smart home, in the fact that we'll get a date and time of when he pulls up to his house, probably by when he connected to his home Wi-Fi, when his phone connected to his home Wi-Fi, or location information. We'll know whether the lights were on when he turned up, or whether he turned them on. So if they were off and he kept them off, we'll know that. We'll know he went up to the bedroom because of the motion sensor. There will be a little flag, possibly, that he went upstairs straight away. And then, obviously, after he did what he did, the smart meter might say he took a shower. You know, and the timestamps of all this might be before he calls 911. So you're thinking, why do you take a shower before you call 911? So all this kind of information will build into a better picture, but you got to know where to look for it and its strengths and its weaknesses. But that's going to be more prominent as time goes by. Just a few last things to remember. Bring a digital forensics expert in early to identify data sources, or there's things that you might not think of, like the Wi-Fi router. Rarely collected on a search warrant, never seen it collected on a search warrant, but there are logs on there that overwrite after a period of time. So identify early on what might be useful. If you need to get somebody else's cell phone, you have to act very quickly in order to secure that. Protect the data even from your own clients, as I mentioned before. Stress the importance. It doesn't matter if, you know, there's an embarrassing photo or you said something bad that's irrelevant to the case. Just give it as is. Screenshots may not be good enough. Sometimes used in family law still, but definitely think of a better way to present that evidence. Use a triangle agreement. We haven't really mentioned privacy when you're asking for a cell phone of somebody else, especially on the other side of a court case. They'll say, oh, well, it's got privileged communications irrelevant, it's personal data. What we tend to use on most cases is what a triangle agreement. So essentially, if I'm trying to get opposing parties' cell phone, I will say that I'll come in and I will collect all the data from that cell phone. I won't provide it to my client, though. What I'll do is I'll wait for both sets of attorneys to come up with search criteria. Like, we only want, you know, to identify relevant things. So we only want images between this time frame, or text messages or communications between these two parties. I will then perform those searches and provide them to opposing counsel first to go through and make sure there's no irrelevant information, there's no privileged information, and when they have a little time frame to come back to us, but once they say that's okay, then we provide that data to our client. So that tends to overcome a lot of these arguments we see in court as to why they can't hand over the cell phone, why they're just producing screenshots, say. So that's something that's useful to overcome those arguments. And then that is that. So thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Simon. If all the attendees can enter in the passcode for today, which is phones, and any questions that you may have. Our first question is, have industry or technology advances changed the application of the law regarding making unauthorized recordings? Concerning this is in relation to the retention of text messages?
In terms of, I haven't seen it applied in terms of, let me see, retention of text messages. Audio recordings, yes, I've encountered different things there. But in terms of retention of text messages, Let's see, change the application of the law. Not that I've encountered, obviously I'm not an attorney, so there's certain legal questions that I don't know about that. I have not encountered that, any kind of challenges to things such as screenshots of made on the phone itself of messages or any production of text messages. Hasn't been challenged in any way. I'm not sure whether I'm understanding the full gist of the question, but I've not encountered anything that's involved unauthorized recordings other than audio recordings, which obviously can be an issue.
Next question. Are you able to access iPhone iCloud data backups without the passcode?
No. What you need now, we need the Apple ID and their password. Law enforcement can. The actual forensics tools allow to use the phone itself that they have, or the forensic extraction of the phone, to access iCloud data. But because it's so powerful and could be misused, only law enforcement is allowed to do that. We tend to we compel the other side to provide Apple IDs and passwords and their cooperation in getting that. Normally they have their own expert sit in, or I sit in while their expert does it. It's not ideal, but yeah, we need the security information before we can get the backups.
Next question. Can you get any data if all you have is a phone number and passcode? In other words, if the owner of the phone is refusing to provide the phone?
If they're refusing to provide the phone, there's not much we can do. Obviously, you can get the Apple ID and the password, but it requires their cooperation to get the iCloud backups. There's nothing we can do there. We used to be able to get the cell tower data to at least show who was texting, who wasn't. But now, we need a court order. We need to say to the court, we need to get the cell tower records for this phone. So there's a lot of coercion that's needed there.
Next question. Do government agencies have more data than you have access to? If so, could they be subpoenaed?
More data. Do they have it? I don't think so. It's quite publicly argued sometimes that government agencies trying to get access to Apple. Apple, of course, has, places like Amazon will have more information than they let on. Whether government agencies get that information from Amazon, it's hard to say. I think it'd be easy for them to block or counter the subpoena. But places like Amazon do store a lot of information. Facebook will store a lot of information and share it with whomever they want, unfortunately. And they're now the keepers of the data. Government can request information from them and store it back. I don't see any way that we can really know what they know. But the companies, the corporations, have a lot more information.
Next question. What sorts of costs or fees are typically involved in this type of discovery?
We normally say a case will cost anywhere between $3,000 and $5,000 for, say, one cell phone. We try and tailor it a little bit less because in terms of like public defender work, they normally have to stick to a $2,500 kind of cost. Your digital forensic expert will cost anywhere from like $300 an hour to $500 or $600 normally. And they should work with you with like a kind of a threshold, because the first thing we normally do is say, this is what it's going to cost. There's probably going to be a $1,500 or a $2,500 retainer initially, but we're going to get the devices and then we're going to sit down in a kind of triage meeting, look at your discovery, go through go through that, and then talk about, okay, now we've looked at it. This is how much it's going to cost. This is how much it's going to be. But generally, we work to that kind of guideline. One per cell phone, it will be about $3,000.
And our last question, do you see tech companies being more cooperative with law enforcement in the future? If not, then is legislation to address possible?
I just don't see it. I'm not sure. They should be. I hope so. I think legislation's because tech companies, they're kind of, one of their selling points is security in these kind of devices. And so it's hard for legislation to be introduced that will hinder that and make it less secure. So a lot of the problems you have is things like Apple, Snapchat. They work around it and say, we're not storing data anymore, this kind of data that you want, or it's encrypted from one end to another, so there's nothing we can give you. They should be more cooperative in terms of their selling, sales-driven data, like Google keeps. It keeps a lot of stuff just so it can sell the information. That will be produced, and I can see that being a little bit more transparent. But the big companies, their selling point is securing the end user and securing criminals as well. Unfortunately, it goes along with that. That's constantly going to be a battle, and I don't think that legislation will be able to counter that.
Thank you, Simon.
No problem.
Please remember that if you are applying for CLE credit, you must have attended the full 60 minutes of this presentation. You're also required to complete this survey at the end of the program. Please note that you will be receiving your certificates via email in 24 to 48 hours after this presentation. I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone for attending, and most especially Simon Varley for his time and effort in creating this presentation. If you would like to speak with Simon, or if you would like to speak with a TASA representative regarding an expert witness, please contact TASA at 1-800-523-2319. One of my colleagues will be following up with you regarding your feedback on today's presentation. Again, thank you all for attending. This concludes our program for today.